call the meeting to order, and if you'll please rise, we'll say the pledge together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And would you please call the roll?
Mr. Workman?
Yes.
Mr. Ward?
Yes.
Mr. Golodai?
Yes.
Ms. Getzmann?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, thank you. And I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting, June 12th.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Wood. I go in a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Were there any corrections? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Golodai?
Yes.
Mr. Workman?
Yes.
Mr. Ward?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. And I'd like to welcome everyone this evening, and we're going to begin with commendation. Mr. Mark Bobo from the Ohio School Board Association is with us, and he is our Central Region Manager and has a new title as the Director of Member Services. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Congratulations.
Hats keep coming. Good evening to each of you. Again, Mark Vogel with the Ohio School Board Association. A privilege to be here tonight. I think the last time I was here, my son was playing AU basketball in one of the areas out here. So I'm kind of mad at myself that the vision bothered me tonight. So
Yeah.
I knew it was coming. But it's a privilege to be here with you tonight. As it was stated, with the Ohio School Board Association, and I want to first say thank you to each of you school board members for your continued dedication to the community here in Mount Vernon. It goes without saying, leadership in this day and time is so critical to the work of public education. I want to thank each of you for your continued dedication to Mount Vernon. But specifically tonight, I do want to honor Mrs. Mary Golodai in regards to 10 years of service to this community. It goes without saying, time flies, number one. But also, as I've said many places, you know, any person that chooses to serve, it's a dedication, it's a commitment, it's love for community. And you epitomize that in your leadership. And as your association, I want to thank you and honor you for your continued service to this community. Mount Vernon City is better because you serve here. And thank you for your service. On behalf of Dr. Kathy McFarland, Chief Executive Officer of the Ohio School Board Association, and the entire staff, thank you for your service to Mount Vernon City. Let's give her a round of applause. To the board, again, thank you all for what you all are doing. Would be remiss if I did not remind you, Capitol Conference was soon coming. Yes, it's only July, but the registration actually opens today. So I encourage each of you to get an opportunity, please take a chance and register, get started. I think our hotel reservations start in September, so no time like now. Capitol Conference, invite each of you to be there. Again, if there's anything that we can do to be of assistance to you, please let us know. I'll keep this very brief. So often, you all have been members with us for well over 60 years, almost as a checker box each year. But we want you to know as your association, we appreciate the opportunity to serve with you. And if there's anything that we can do to be of more of assistance to you, please do not hesitate to let us know. All right, thank you all for your time tonight. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome to stay, but we know if you want to get going, we
Well,
can.
listen, I'm actually got very comfortable back there, so I'm good. I'm good. Thank you all. Thank you.
so much. No city government, and do we have anyone else, except we do have public participation. And the first person is Dr. Tickle.
All right. Appreciate you all letting us come up here and share, as always, in the humidity and everything else. Hopefully we can get out here before the rain. Listen, we're not here, I want to stay close to my nose so I can get this for you. We're not here simply as hat hunters looking for evil in the dark corner. I want you to understand that we're here because we care about our children and our grandchildren's education, and they need you too. That's why you're sitting at this table. My wife has looked at books from other school districts that she's come across that have been put on the chopping block, and a lot of those are not found in your library, and we appreciate that. So when there's good stuff, we're here for that too, okay? We're not just here to hunt heads, but we're grateful for that. And the reason we're here is to keep the debate open about what's appropriate and what we feel is inappropriate for our children whose brains are still in the process of forming, you know. You do have quite a few books in the middle school library that are not age appropriate and overtly LGBTQ+, which we know that's hard to deal with, but they made it profoundly clear during their Pride Month that their chant went, "We are coming after your children." And I don't think that was encouragement. It sounded like a threat to me. And we can't just stand back and watch. And it is the fact that overt sexual material has a profound effect on the brain, and it affects and creates pathways in the brain in the same way that heroin and meth do. And we know the problems that those cause. And they call it censorship. We call it parental and adult responsibility. Kids don't come out of the womb with the ability to make good and healthy decisions. We all know that. They've got to be taught. And if we teach our children to make decisions according to feeling, you know as well as I do that they will make a lot of bad decisions with long-term consequences. We know that. Every one of us sitting here as adults make decisions that don't feel good in the moment, but we know they're right, and we know that the right decision is made when we don't just feel in the moment, but we consider the long-term consequences down the road. That's why we're here. We're here because we believe that there needs to be accountability in our schools, there needs to be accountability in our libraries, in our classrooms, and in the Board of Education, right? And I hope you'll consider the information that's given this evening and consider the long-term consequences rather than just taking the path of least resistance, which, you know, I was telling my wife on the way in here, you know, a lot of my life, a lot of decisions I've made on the path of least resistance rather than doing what I should. And it's always best to consider all areas and just make sure you do the right thing for the kids. That's all I had to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now let me take over.
I just want to thank you all for letting me speak again today. I'm representing the Knox County Citizens for School Accountability, and I have some questions I'd like to ask you all. I wanted to know, have you done anything or considered anything of what we've discussed over the past several months? We've received no correspondence with that. Questions I have are, who picked the book for the library? What are the safeguards to keep inappropriate books out of the library? Isn't this where this should begin? If there's a review board, there needs to be parents on the board as well as staff and faculty. There needs to be more accountability on books coming into the library. One person who might have agenda should be held accountable, as with any position. For example, pushing sexuality. Book fairs. Who chooses the books that are brought in to the school or the Scholastic Books Clubs? We were told there were several LGBT books on the table at the last book fair at Columbia School. What safeguards are in place to prevent these from getting into the children's hands? There's a 53.5% suicide rate in the trans lifestyle. Do you want to be responsible for allowing this to happen to the children in your schools? Are you aware that there are 6 LGBTQ books at Twin Oaks School? Another article that I just came across was sent to me is from the Columbus Dispatch. Columbus teens graduate from Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio Peer Education Program. There were 12 students that graduated from this class. Ohio is the only state in the country without health care curriculum standards. Lawmakers advanced legislations that restricted Planned Parenthood's ability to serve as a provider of sex education to Ohio public schools. To close the gap, as part of its work ensuring young Ohioans have access to comprehensive sex education, PPGOH's Peer Education Program, a collaboration with the Ohio Center for Sex Education, provides youth ages 14 to 19 with the tools to become leaders, educators, and advocates for healthy sexual choices, behaviors, attitudes, relationships in their schools and communities. Once the student's training is complete, they are required to provide a total of 55 one-on-one presentations, single presentations to the audience of 10 or more, and another group of over 100 individuals throughout to reach utilizing the lessons they've learned before being able to graduate. Graduating peers educators successfully prove they have learned to educate their peers on developing essential life skills such as building healthy relationships, refusing and delaying intercourse, and planning for adulthood. The program has also empowered graduate students to advocate for changes in government and school policies regarding reproductive freedom, LGBTQ+ rights, and more inclusive sexual education. My question, you opened a health clinic at the end of last year's school. Is this program that they're talking about here going to be used at Mount Vernon schools? Since it was in the Mount Vernon school paper, Mount Vernon newspaper, I would like to know if that's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, is it? Packers?
Thank you very much. I gave you a script. It's not an exact representation of what I'm going to share, but it's essentially that. I'm going to be speaking in the first person, but what I'm sharing represents both my wife and myself. I'm Thomas Pappas. I'm permanently certified in the state of Ohio, both middle and high school English. I have bachelor's and master's degrees from Ohio State University and Pennsylvania State Universities, and I'm an absolute 1,000% proponent of public education here in Ohio, having given so many years to it myself. Dear Mr. Cedar and board members of the Mount Vernon City School District, this is going to be a rapid read. The Knox County Citizens for School Accountability have now attended multiple meetings, both with the school board and privately with Superintendent Cedar. At this point in time, I'm disappointed that we have received no indication of how the board intends to proceed with our written requests, which are threefold: remove 5 books in violation of federal law, for appealing to prudent, prurient interests of children in the categories of sexual explicit content, masturbation, and erotic fantasy. 2, remove a list of books from the middle school library that are deemed inappropriate for age level. And 3, request to make all future purchases of book titles publicly available to students. It is my initial impression through this process that this board promotes themselves as a body that values the diversity that the public school system must provide. It purports to defend a program that is relevant, respectful to the educational needs of every student, as you attempt to be as well transparent with parents. However, your website links to reading content that you recommend for students to access directly without parental awareness. 2, the district's decision is to adopt the SEL philosophy of student engagement by teachers and staff, including, of course, student surveys. And 3, the recent decision to partner our district with Nationwide Children's Hospital as an on-campus healthcare provider. This bypassing existing healthcare providers of individual families would suggest an undermining of parental authority. Surveying students at school about their personal attitudes, anxieties, and sexual preferences, and discouraging them from sharing these conversations with parents that they are having in classroom also undermines parental authority in the home. It seems the district has moved from being an institution of basic cognitive education to one that seeks to involve themselves in the most intimate details of personal family space. On July 1st, 2023, the Mount Vernon News published an article to which Melody has made reference, promoting a program being initiated by Planned Parenthood and Ohio's Peer Education Program. This program will expand the school district's education to the sexual arena and promote the instruction of sexual practices, not only relating to heterosexual, but also to the quote-unquote safe LGBTQ sexual practices that in fact merely seek to inform the student population about the LGBTQ student sexual experience. I wonder, will that be the next frontier of the Mount Vernon City School District? In closing, I want to speak to my objection to what appears to be an invasion of the family unit by the school district. As a Christ follower trying to understand your diversity ideology, my faith personally has violated. The children you serve have been created in the image of God, holy God, and given to parents so that they can train them up in the discipline of the Lord, or however they choose. They were not given to the school district nor to the governing authorities of the state. Your role is to educate children, not to provide quote-unquote health care embedded with philosophies that most parents deem harmful to their child. It is the parent who has been charged with the task of nurturing their sexual impressions and their morality according to biblical truth, not the school district's idea of diversity. Moreover, if you can offer books on witchcraft and demonic practice in your libraries, then in the name of diversity, you must make room for Christian faith principles as well. Are you prepared to do that in this prevailing time of today where we think not so much in terms of protection of freedom of religion, but more, unfortunately, freedom from religion? The public education of children needs to accommodate Christian faith and attitudes the same as it does for those of the LGBT student and the student who choose to deny Christian faith altogether. That is not happening in this school district. So thank you very much. What I shared as well as what's written here, which is a basic approximation of that, it contains caricatures that do not fit you and probably some misinformation. But we just want to suggest to you that we're not going to go away. And just having in this past week, 10 days, 2 weeks, passed in our state this legislation that promotes school choice, already a beginning exodus from public schools into private schools and home schools. I'm sure the last thing we want is media attention on the incongruity between what parents know and what the school district is doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Karen Bush is.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that's what
Okay.
it meant.
All righty.
I should have read.
All right, I think Mr. Cedar's district update will address some of the concerns that were mentioned tonight. And if you would like to talk about additions and deletions?
Sure, we have one deletion for tonight's board agenda. It's under the personnel section, under certificated and licensed staff. We've deleted item K, it was a medical leave provision, and we're gonna go back and do some double checking on that, to bring that back to the board at our next meeting. Under our superintendent's report, I do have traditionally our district update that I'd like to share. It's been kind of a busy month. July, it tends to be a month where all of our administrators are gone. There's just a few folks in the central office, and that's a time when we take vacation. But I didn't want someone to think that we weren't paying attention to what was brought to our attention, and I'm going to share some of that tonight. So the fact that we didn't get right back to you within a month when you shared this with us in June, this is an attempt to do that. So while I respect your opinion, I'm a little disappointed, and would hope that you would just respect our time and effort to get this done. Okay? First of all, in the district update, go to slideshow. We are really close to the start of school, and so I wanted to share just a couple of important dates before we jump into some other sections. Our first day with students will be Thursday, August 17th. Our teachers will arrive on the 14th, where we'll have some in-service and some things going on then. We do something unique here in Mount Vernon. We have a staggered start. So on Thursday, only our 6th graders will be at the middle school. Our 7th and 8th graders will join them on Friday. It gives those incoming 6th graders who were 5th graders this past year really a chance to kind of have the building to themselves. They've all come from smaller little elementaries to the high school or to the middle school, and so that's important. And we do the same at the high school. We bring in just the 9th graders on Thursday. Our kindergartners, for a lot of our kindergartners, it's the first time they've really come to some sort of kind of an all-day educational setting. A lot have preschool, but a lot do not. So we go every other day for about a week, and then we get all of those youngsters back on the last day, on the last Friday in August. Our start times are at the elementary, they go from 9 o'clock to 3:30, doors open at 8:45. The middle school, 7:40 to 2:35, doors open at 7:20. Transportation, real quickly, those will be sent out via our Instant Connect and our parent portal. Those will be up really soon. I know our bus drivers meet, I believe it will be next week, to assign those routes. So once we get those assigned, we'll make those available. All of our forms are online, and so we encourage our parents, they don't have to send in the paper copy. They can if they like, but we make them available to do those online school forms. I'll skip over to the right-hand side, back to school night. So our back to school night for all elementary schools in Mount Vernon will be Tuesday, August 15th from 6 to 7:30. There will be a 7th and 8th grade greet and meet on the 15th at 5 to 6:30, and we'll have what we call our 6th grade parents' first flight. So not only is it interesting for our kiddos to come to middle school, but for some of our parents, it's their first time too, and so we kind of treat them a little extra special. I will say in the breakfast and lunch programs, we really are encouraging all families to fill out the free and reduced lunch application. There's been some changes in Ohio relative to that, and I think they're positive changes. So in the past, if you qualified for free, you got a free lunch. If you qualified for a reduced lunch, you paid, I think it was $35 or 35 cents for your lunch. But in Governor DeWine's biennial budget, he included a special provision that all students, free and reduced, will receive free breakfast and free lunch. And so I think that's a really positive thing, and wanted to make that mention. Student drop off and pick up, especially that first week, parents will get a time when that bus will be there. We just encourage you to be out there at 5 minutes earlier just to make sure, and we'll kind of make some of those corrections as we go. District communications, we'll do it through Instant Connect, which is our alert system. If you're not signed up, you can find out how to sign up online. And then we have contact information at the bottom. This is on our district website. Parents can go to that and they can find out those things. The supply list, we'll have principals will be coming back next Tuesday, will be their first day. And so we'll make sure that those supply lists are up and online for parents to do their thing. I did want to make a library presentation to the board, and quite frankly, it was something I've been working on really since you all had shared in June, and we had a meeting in end of May. And we weren't trying to skirt this issue. We want to step towards it and address it. And so I've got a lot of information to share with some slides in here, and can certainly talk about this at a different time if need be. So here's what I wanted to do here was a library review and an update. Share just a little bit about our board policy, some budget allocations, current book totals, circulation. I kind of lumped that all into library information. Library guiding principles, our selection process, and our challenge process. And I wanted to make sure that I could briefly share that. I thought this was important, so Board Policy 2521 does direct me as the superintendent to make sure that we're adequately, we have adequate personnel and materials in our libraries. Each library shall be staffed by a certified librarian or by an aide or volunteer supervised by a certified librarian. We're very fortunate here in Mount Vernon. We have 2 certified librarians, and our elementaries have aides, and some who have been doing it for quite some time. Library services will be available throughout the school day. Typically at the elementary, they'll come down once a week. Typically at the middle school, they will come once every 2 weeks or even longer than that. They only come through English classes. We don't have study halls at the middle school. At the high school, however, we do have study halls, and students do go to the library during their study halls. And I'll share with you some other things there. We do have an annual school district expenditure for that. It's 1/2 of 1% of the general fund expenditure, and that we certainly meet that requirement. The allocation of educational resources are reviewed once every 5 years. Just to give you a quick bit of additional information, again, the high school and the middle school have a certified librarian. All 6 elementaries have library aides. Library budgets for the 23-24 school year, the high school and middle school each have $13,500. Now they'll use that for online subscriptions, digital media stuff, as well as books. The elementary schools get $4,500 per school. We did reduce our library budgets this year. We've actually done a 10% cut across all budget items, just as we're trying to be proactive with our finances as we move on down the road. But I just wanted to give you an idea what those budgets are for this year. You might find this interesting. This is our collection. So all of our buildings have libraries. Some are bigger than others. At the Columbia Elementary, they have, well, let me start at the top. So it's divided into 4 categories. There are biographies, there are picture books, which are really what they sound like. They're younger kids with picture books. We have fiction, nonfiction, and of course I've got a total column there. So for instance, Columbia Elementary has 10,000 volumes in their library. You can see Dan Emmett is about 11,000, East is about 11,500, Pleasant Street's 11,600. Twin Oak is 16,874. One of the reasons why Twin Oak may be a little bit bigger, although it is one of our bigger elementaries, there were 2 elementaries that closed and came together. And so obviously they brought both collections, weeded out the, the things that either weren't used or the commonalities. The middle school has 21,000 volumes and the high school has 14,000 volumes. I thought this next slide was interesting. This is our circulation, or books that are checked out of our libraries. You'll notice the elementaries are going to be, they check out books to a much greater extent, and partly because it's a weekly thing that they do and kids will check out. And at the younger levels, we're learning to read, and as we get older, we're reading to learn. So you'll notice our big ones here. Twin Oak probably has more checkouts than anybody. Pleasant Street Elementary would come in second, which makes sense because they're our second biggest elementary, and you can see that as you go down. You'll notice Mount Vernon Middle School, about 8,000 in a given year. I don't know whether this will surprise you or not, but the high school only checked out 637 books last year. So at the high school level, the library isn't quite used in the same way or the same manner. And kids have the ability to go there. And so they're finding other means of media and ways to find their information. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what our checkout circulation was. You'll also notice, it's kind of interesting, you'll notice earlier in the year, we have a tendency to have more checkouts than maybe we do at the end of the year. Board Policy 2520, called the Selection of Instructional Materials and Equipment, really says that the superintendent shall ensure a process of selection and maintenance of instructional materials. In addition, he or she will periodically provide a systematic review by the board's direction to ensure that we have appropriateness for our current educational program. Based on conversations I've had with our friends out here and just concerns that have been shared in the past, I felt like this was a year that we would take a good review and step back and take a look at what we have. I really determined that I thought there were two really primary areas that we needed to review. First, the library selection process. How do we choose books? And two, the library challenge process. I really feel strongly about appropriateness versus censorship. We can talk about what appropriateness means. Some of that's age level stuff that has already been mentioned. And so those are the two things that I really felt, based upon our conversations and the things that you had shared, that I thought we would look at and address. Now, obviously, in the month of July, it felt like a little bit like a lone adventure, although I did have some conversations late June after we met relative to some groups. So I really felt like this, and I thought I'd use kind of a silly play, like Alice in Wonderland, down the rabbit hole. I went down the library rabbit hole, and you can go so many directions. It's amazing. I did have a meeting with the Info Ohio director, Erica Clay. I've talked to our legal counsel. I met with our librarians and principals. I've done some research articles, just as you all do research articles. I have signed up for and reviewed over a dozen review sites, and probably that's my rabbit hole, because for every review site, I can read one review and another review will be different and another one will be completely different. This one might say grades here, this might say grades here, and it was almost overwhelming. Which one do you choose? And hence my rabbit hole analogy. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know, but it was. I went to Book List, Book Looks, Horn, Kirkus, School Library Journal, Info Ohio, Common Sense Media, Children's Literature Comprehensive Database. So looking at that and taking books that you shared and just putting them on those sites and getting a sense for where they're at. And I think that's an important piece for us to do as we move forward. As we think about selection of new books, we really need to look at them carefully, vet them out, make sure they fit some sort of criteria. I found this article to be very interesting, and it was from the American Library Association, and I'll encapsulate it a little bit here, but it seems to me like the age group that is our most challenged, the one that's been shared with me is our biggest challenge, is this really weird tween kind of an age group from a 10-year-old sixth grader to a 14-year-old eighth grader. It's an incredibly different time with different feel. I feel really good where we're at our elementary school. And the high school, we don't check out many books, but they tend to be older. They have to start to make those kinds of decisions as they go, but it's this really weird area. And ironically, the American Library Association recognized that as well. Many selectors have to play a guessing game when choosing books for middle school collections. Not all YA titles are ideal for middle school audiences, why many middle school grade novels are a bit too immature. Librarians selecting titles for these focus collections must look carefully at the maturity level of the subject matter, age of the protagonist, and overall appeal to kids in grades 6 through 8. Purchasing for such a narrow age range means poring over published reviews. And I really do think it's a challenge. And for them to even recognize that, I think is important. So this has been here since I came 10 years ago. This was shared with me as our library selection process. And as I really took a good look at that process, I just didn't feel like it was comprehensive enough, that it didn't allow for criteria. I want to know, it's nice to know where we're looking for books and kind of what references we're looking at, but what are some of the selective criteria? And when you read down through this, and you know, I've shared this with our other groups too, you don't really get that feeling like, okay, here's what we're looking for. And this is the second page. It does go on to say we consult reviews from professional journals, we submit our request to our principals for approval, and we go through those kinds of processes. I just think we need to revisit it, and we need to look at it a little bit differently. So again, I went to the American Library Association because I felt like they had some good stuff to share as others. And so instead of having that list of where we look for books, how about some criteria? Support and enrich the curriculum, meet standards of literary, artistic, and aesthetic quality. I've highlighted a couple here that I think are really important and things we need to consider. Be appropriate for the subject area and for the age, emotional development, ability level, learning style, social, emotional, intellectual development of students. I mean, if we don't take that into account when we're selecting books, we're probably not doing the best job we can. And I'm not saying that we haven't done that, but it's not been put out there in some sort of a written format. I did also highlight earn favorable reviews and standards reviewing sources and favorable recommendations based on preview examination by professional personnel. And then it goes on, there are some other things that are in this particular American Library piece that I think demonstrate importance. So again, providing a global perspective, promoting diversity by including materials by authors and illustrators of all cultures. I mean, I think we have to do those kinds of things. So I want to really, I think with board permission, of course, I think we need to really look at the selection so that we can, quite frankly, give not only our librarians, our library aides, something that they can vet against, all right? I did find some things that I found really interesting in my rabbit hole. This is just one rating system. I tried to find rating systems that I felt like I could put some meat to. Common Sense Media, whether you like it or not, it's a rating system. And what I thought was interesting about this particular rating system is it'll say right below our ratings is a list of content categories, gives you in-depth information on each title. Each category is rated on a scale of 0 to 5. If no dots are filled in, that means the content is either not applicable or doesn't even rate on the scale. If 3 dots are highlighted, that means there's a fair amount of that type of content. 5 dots means there's a lot of that in there. Okay? And again, I'm not saying that Common Sense Media is the end all of sources, but to have something that kind of puts some sort of a litmus test to it. In their particular rating system, they have these. So they ask these questions when they are reviewing a book. Does it have a positive message? And you can see the questions there. Are there positive role models? Does it have diverse representation? Is there violence or scariness to it? Is there sex, romance, and nudity involved? Is there language concerns? Is there drinking, drugs, and smoking? What's the educational value? I mean, if you can ask yourself questions as you go down through that, again, where you put yourself on dots, I mean, that's a whole interesting exercise in and of itself. But I think we have to have these kind of questions in conversations. I will say in Common Sense Media, again, they don't have every book in there. I mean, so they have reviewers, and for every 3 that I could find, there might be 10 that they didn't review. And it makes it tough. So then you go to the next one. I did find another one that was along the same lines I kind of liked. It was called Book Looks. And again, Book Looks was the same thing. I could find some titles and it really gave me all this information. It would rate a book as a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5. And I know it's hard to read from a distance, but for instance, teen guidance, even I can't read it from this guy. Some content may not be appropriated for children under 13. So you can go, is it moderate violence, moderate hate, moderate profanity, drug and alcohol use, explicit sexuality, explicit gender ideologies. And in book looks, what they do is they kind of rate those things out and they'll rate the book. And to give you an example, the book that you shared called Sex is Funny?
That's one of them,
Sex
yes.
is a funny word.
Sex is a funny word.
Yep, sex is a funny word. It's rated a 4. And so, you know, that rating alone and then looking at some of the age appropriatenesses of it, I mean, I think those are ways that we can carefully evaluate a book and determine whether, one, it needs to be in our collection, or maybe it's just in the wrong place, okay? Again, I don't have any silver bullet here other than to say I'm looking for things that can kind of help us as we go on down the road, all right? So I really think we need to pay some time in the selection process. I think in the meantime, until we really come up with that set of criteria, we've talked about just holding off on any new selection of texts or books until we really kind of vet this out a little bit more clear, so that all of our librarians and aides at elementary, middle, and high at least have some criteria to look at, okay? Then there's the challenge process, and that's what was brought to us in June. They brought 5 books to us. And again, I'm not going to read through the board policy on that. You can see it. It's guiding policy 9130. But what I do want to get to is the challenge process, and I've shared the challenge process with all of you. And yet, I'd like to make a recommendation to the board to revise this process just a little bit, and I'll share with you what I mean. Again, this is called Matters Regarding Instructional Materials. If a request, suggestion, or complaint relates to instructional materials such as textbooks, library books, reference works, and other instructional, the following shall follow. The criticism will be addressed to the principal in writing and shall include the author, title, publisher, sections objected to by page, by item, reason for the objection, and we also have a form that they'll fill out, 9130F. Upon receipt of the information, the principal shall advise me, the superintendent, of the complaint. The superintendent shall appoint a review committee and be an ex officio member of that committee. So we go straight from the complaint straight to this committee. And it's not easy just making up committees, and nor do committees have, you know, this invaluable amount of time to invest in that. And when you look at the specifics of that challenge process, the committee evaluating the request shall be guided by the following criteria, and it's listed there. And then they come back, and there's 20 business days, and you know, I know you all have read through some of that, in case to advise a complaint in writing, and so on and so forth. But the process of specifics go like this. We use Robert's Rules of Orders. I develop the committee. I'm not on the committee, but I appoint or ask members to be a part of it. It's not even easy finding people wanting to invest that kind of time at this point. But the first meeting, copies of the petitioner's complaint is given to all those members. Then copies of the materials are given to all of those committee members. So now I have to purchase 5 books. If I got a committee of 5, it's a committee of 3, 4, whatever, I have to secure that many copies and say, here, you got it. The petitioner may make an oral presentation. They have 15 minutes to come in front of that committee and make an oral presentation. The chairperson directs each member to review the complaint carefully and be prepared to vote on the issue at the second meeting. Again, led by the chairperson, the petitioner may be present to observe. Vote of a simple majority of those present entitled to vote will determine the resolution of the complaint. Only members who have read or viewed the material in its entirety can vote. Balloting will be written and confidential. The vote will then be forwarded to me, and I'll review that decision, and then I share that decision with the complainant. Okay, so that's quite a process that takes place. What I'd like the board to consider is an additional step in here, because I think just in my short time here in July, looking at some of these things, it didn't take me long to pull a book, get a sense for what the complaint was, for me to get in and look at the review sites, for me to see the age appropriateness of things, and formulate my own opinion. Now, that's not for me to do relative to these books right now, but that was done in relatively short order. What I'd love to see is, upon receipt of the information from the complainant, the principal shall meet with the librarian and a reading specialist to review the complaint. The principal will report the findings or action to the complainant, and they will go through what we'll call a preliminary review. They can do that little short dive. It may be so simple, they're like, you know what, this book shouldn't be in the middle school. It feels like it's more appropriate at an older level. Or maybe they think it shouldn't even be there at all. But I think there has to be this little middle area where they can do some sort of a quick review. Now, if their quick review disagrees with the complainants, then they share that with the complainant, who then can take it to the more formal process, which would then come to me, and then we develop a committee, and you know, we go through the distributing the books. They all got to read the books, so on and so forth. I just feel like we could probably address some of these in a quicker fashion, and save that time that it takes a committee to do it. I will say that when we did a book, I think back in 2019, it's the only one I've done in my 10 years here, it probably took a good month for that committee to read the book, to come together, to do the, you know, all of that. It just takes time, and it takes resources. And again, that's what I wanted to share with you for your consideration. So two things really. Really developing a more set, clear criteria for purchasing books, and two, maybe modifying the challenge process so that maybe we can see if we can address some of these without having to go through the full-blown process. The Knox County Citizens for School Accountability shared with us at our June board meeting some specific books to challenge that were located in the middle school library. We've located 4 of the books. I pulled them from circulation, and so those books are now at central office. All right? I don't know if you guys got a chance to read those specific books, but my gosh, they're probably 650 pages. I mean, they're huge, which is already an indication when you look at, again, I feel like I'm becoming a library researcher. Books that are this big or lots of pages generally aren't middle school appropriate. They're generally going to be that 175 to 225 range. So those are sitting in my office as we speak. The group also presented a list of books that were listed in the MARC system of Info Ohio as grade level appropriate for 912. Well, that was a new experience for me. I don't go to Info Ohio a lot, but I've soon found myself navigating Info Ohio. I went down to the Fetch, system. I was able to kind of locate books, and sometimes within the description, they'll share the grade level. So I called the lady from Info Ohio, the director, and I said, talk to me about what this means in the MARC system. And you can kind of see in bold, and maybe I can read it. She indicates to me, you mentioned ratings that appear for some materials in your library catalogs. What I was mentioning there was the age levels of the reading thing. I know that arguing semantics may not always be helpful, but I think it's fair to let the folks who are questioning those know that they are not ratings, they are suggested audiences that can come from many sources. When your librarian purchases a book for your library, she likely does it through an agency with whom she has a contract, Follett, for example, or Junior Library Guild. And that agency provides additional services like that MARC record system. So this is coming from the publisher, right? Usually the audience suggestion comes in reading grade level, interest age level, and then they throw in accelerated reader and so on and so forth. Well, these are located in the MARC screen 521. I got really quick at going to, so there's all this information, go to 521. And it could say one of a couple things. It might say grades 9 through 12. That tells me that the author thought it was a 9 through 12. I do get some that go down and they give an age range, like 14 to 17. Okay, here's where we get into that real weird conundrum, right? So I got 10-year-olds and I got 14-year-olds. Should a 14-year-old have access, or does that mean that 10, 11, and 12 and 13-year-olds also have access? So trying to determine what that really means. And, you know, I certainly have a thought on that, but I would want to certainly that kind of a piece out. But it is something that's there that is something we can hone in on. It's not reading level, it's audience level or interest level. Reading levels can, I mean, you can take a very mature book and take the reading level down to a really low level, right? So I think that mark system is an important one that we can look at. And then through all the review sites, I did find that the reviewers, certain review sites will also recommend an age level, a minimum age level. And so I think that was certainly helpful in its work. I went through, I bet half of that list you gave me, and they were 9 to 12. And I think it's going to bear conversation. Now, that doesn't mean that we censor them or that we ban them, but it may mean, you know what, those are more appropriate at the high school. Although they don't check many books out of high school, but I mean, it might just be more appropriate at that particular grade level. I wanted to share with you one particular one, and it's on this author that was shared with me. So of the 5 books that were shared, 3 of them came from a very specific author. And so this is just one title from that author that was shared. I went to Common Sense Media, age 15 plus. I went to the School Library Journal, grade 9 and up. I went to Kirkus, again, another one that we use. Now that said fantasy 13 and up. I went to Book List, 9 through 12. I mean, so it wouldn't take me long if I knew the right sites and we approved the sites, because let's be honest, I can find a very liberal site and I can find a very conservative site. I don't know where the right one in the middle is. But it would be clear to me after this just initial look, this might be a book that really fits more 9-12. The size of the book also made me believe it was 9-12. Some of the other things that were red flags as I read is, what's the age of the protagonist, the main character of the book? If the protagonist is a high school student, it probably is geared more towards high school. The age in the girl in translation, I think that you shared before. Yes, it started out as an 11-year-old girl, but only a few chapters in, and now all of a sudden she is in high school and then on to college, and then of course those chapters toward the end of the book, absolutely not within what we would deem appropriate for a middle school student. So I think finding that age piece. Now, I did go through a few of these and looked at some of the page numbers that were referenced. We could have conversations about whether we thought that was explicit. We talked about it, sexually explicit, what that really means. And I guess I could say I've seen some that I absolutely went, absolutely. I'm not sure that some of these were quite there, but again, that might be part of a challenge, especially if we came back and said that these books based upon their age was fine. Just to give you a quick look, here's an Info Ohio page. See this little fetch at the bottom? All right, you click on fetch or you click on iSearch. You can do either one. The next page shows 2 books that the group shared with me that was in that big list. And clearly, you can look right here, reading levels. So the reading level is 14 to 17, but the grade level is 9 to 12. All right, same here, 14 and up, but the interest level or the audience in this case is 9 and up. And so there certainly is a valid concern and something that feels more concrete that you can grab a hold of. Doesn't mean it needs to be gone, we're not banning it, but is it better suited to be cataloged somewhere differently? Okay. Always want to make sure that our folks understand this, because I don't know of other districts that do this, and I give Mr. Hankins here a lot of credit when he was principal at the middle school. We're one of the few districts that when any student checks a book out of our library, parents are notified by email that their child checked that book out. There has to be a conduit. Parents have to take some ownership in having conversations about the book. And this is my grandson, so I know he checked out a Guinness World Record, Fly Guy, Fly Girl, T-Rex with teeth. I mean, and so my daughter could look at those books and she goes, oh, yep, I see what he's checking out, you know? And if you're not sure what they're checking out, then check it out. That's what this is about. And we do that all the way up through. Some people have lost it in spam and then they find it and they unspam it, but it is something that we have working on a regular basis. So before I move on to the second part, any questions from the board relative to just the information that I shared tonight?
I'd like to thank you for all the work you've done. I know it's been a challenge, and I think what you've shared with us is, you know, age appropriateness that's easy, you know. And I think we already did use the librarian, as I understand it, for one of the books that,
The librarian actually looked at the book and she goes, you know what, you're right. I will say that the 5 books that were presented to me that are in my office right now, I looked at the checkout, how many people checked it out. They've been in there since 2014. 2 of them have been checked out twice in those 7 or 8 years. And so whether they're of interest or not, I don't know. I mean, if I was a middle school kid and I saw a book that big, I'd be like,
Yeah.
I'm not getting that one. It doesn't even have pictures in it.
I'd like to say also that I like the idea of the principal going to the librarians and ask them, because I trust the librarians who so much experience, and that's why they are a librarian, in choosing books that are appropriate, and so I think that would be an excellent step to put in there.
I think with that too, like you said, it's gonna expedite some of those that are more clear, the decision, and it wouldn't call for having to put together the committee and the time involved with that. I think it will expedite those books that shouldn't have any question.
I'll say that too, the efficiency of that.
Yeah.
And the ones that should be in the library.
Right.
Right. And the cross-reference of having those titles in the hands of parents once they're checked out, to me, solidifies the fact of our concern for the books that the kids are checking out and gives the parents a check and balance so that they are fully aware of what their children are reading. So I think it's very important.
I appreciate too the presentation here. That tells me you're taking it seriously, and I personally appreciate that. So, thank you.
It certainly isn't finished.
Right.
Because that rabbit hole that I talked about, I don't know for sure what the rating system is. I can look at a lot of review sites. Someone may say, I like Common Sense Media. Someone might say, I like Kirkus. And they may have 2 different opinions on a particular book.
Right.
I've read a number of sites where parents are the reviewers. Well, I mean, then you have to look at the site and who are the reviewers, right? And therein becomes a bit more of a challenge of really realizing who's reviewing those sites as we go. And I'm not opposed to considering new texts or new books that we get to, you know, to make those available just by title. Here's the new books this year. Again, we may still come to a point where we agree to disagree because some may want absolutely nothing to do with an LGBTQ author or a protagonist or someone in the book who might have, you know, a gay friend. Okay, I don't know that would be reason for complete elimination of the book. I mean, and so we may find some disagreements relative to that, but being transparent is what we want to really encourage.
Well, thank you for your due diligence.
All right, Fraser Solar Project. So as you're aware, the Fraser Solar Group, and I shared slides with you, so I didn't put all the slides I shared with you earlier. Some of you have heard a little bit of this before. It certainly has been part of Mount Vernon News. So there is a Fraser Solar Project. They're proposing to use 840 agricultural acres in Clinton and Miller Townships, as well as the city of Mount Vernon, to establish solar fields. Solar field is a big array of solar panels in the field. It would be a 40-year proposal, at which time, when that time runs out, according to Open Road Renewables, it could go back to being agricultural land. The Fraser Solar Group has been in conversation with the Knox County Commissioners in an effort to gain approval of, and this is important to note, qualified energy project tax exemption. That's commonly called pilot. So pilot is a qualified energy project tax exemption. That must be approved or denied by the Knox County Commissioners. They've been gracious enough to include Mount Vernon City Schools and the Career Center in conversations about this particular tax exemption or pilot because it impacts us. So they wanted to gain some insight from us. This is a decision they have to make. But this next part is really, really important. I need the board to understand this. Local officials, the county commissioners, Mount Vernon City Schools or Career Center, we have no say in whether a solar field gets approved for Knox County. That's all determined at the state level at the Ohio Power Sitting Board. They make that determination. So we're not taking sides on this whole idea of solar, right? I mean, some may like it, some may not like it. There's all kinds of information. There's certainly probably, like everything, there's disinformation, but we don't make a choice whether to have solar fields or not have solar fields. We may have our own personal opinions, but even if we did, we don't get to make that choice. The Knox County Commissioners, they, however, do have a choice, not whether we have them or not, but whether they would approve or deny the pilot application or the tax exemption piece. Here's the irony of it, well, this is okay. The Ohio Power Sitting Board won't take this application up until August of 2024. So they're not even gonna make an answer on whether we have solar fields or not until August of 2024. However, this pilot application, the county commissioners asked for a 30-day extension, so they have until August 14th to say, okay, if it passes, we're in favor of the pilot project. If it passes, we're not in favor of the pilot project. If it doesn't pass, there's no skin in the game for them whatsoever. But they have to make a choice by August 14th, okay? And so that's kind of what I put down there. Again, if the project will not go forward and the pilot will be null and void if the Ohio Power Sitting Board says, you know what, no to Knox County. But if the Ohio Power Sitting Board approves the application, the decision that the Knox County Commissioners must make by August 14th has some important considerations. Number one, if the county commissioners deny the pilot application, that means Fraser Solar, who would be moving ahead with their project, would be responsible for property taxes under our current statutory assessment. They would pay taxes like everybody else, okay? If the county commissioners accept the pilot application, that would exempt Fraser Solar from property taxes, but they would also assure that the taxing jurisdictions would receive what we call payment in lieu of taxes. So they still are paying something, it's just not the tax. And then what they do is they break down where those taxes go, and then they looked at those taxing entities and they guarantee a certain amount every year. And on the right-hand side, you can see all these entities receive money based on property taxes. Fraser Solar then, if the pilot would be approved, they would provide those entities with that percentage, that annual amount, and that 40-year total. And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And so you've got that you can take a look at. Moving forward, if the commissioners would deny the pilot application, Fraser would be responsible for the property taxes under the statutory assessment. Okay, that's the commissioner's choice. But what we also have to understand is the property value of that 840 acres would increase. And when the property values increase in our county, the state thinks we're wealthier and they'll give us less state funding. We don't get any more money, but they think we're wealthier and they will give us less money, okay? A study by Fleeter and Associates, and Fleeter is a real, he's an education think tank guy, did a study that state funding for Mount Vernon City schools over the 40 years, just because our property values went up, the state gave us less, we would lose about $8.138 million during that time frame. That's a lot of money. It's 40 years, I understand, but it's a lot of money. The next item here is kind of an interesting piece. If the pilot application was approved, the real estate and personal property are exempt from traditional taxing structures and therefore not reported by the county auditor to the Ohio Department of Taxation and then to the Ohio Department of Education. So in other words, if we accept the pilot project under Ohio Revised Code, the property values, the increase that might have there will not affect us at the state level when it comes to funding for schools. And that's a big deal. Well, you just saw it's considerable. So the pilot payments would have no effect on state funding formula and are now in addition to the state funding. This graph to the right is interesting. So the blue graph represents no pilot. Didn't do a pilot. You'll see in years, right away in year 3, I mean, we're getting a lot of money in year 3 that is coming to Knox County and that list of groups. But you see how it starts to trail down, and over time, at about the 16-year mark, it crosses with this line, and then as the years go on out into 25, 27, 30, it ends up flattening out here. The pilot, what it does is it guarantees a certain amount over a 40-year period of time, which allows Fraser to be able to have a better sense of what they can provide for that piece. So that would provide, it would go up here and it would stay flat for the life. Well, once these two lines cross, just like our budget and deficit lines of our thing, once these cross, we'll continue to get this amount for 40 years. Just a note, I will no longer be the superintendent.
We won't be here either.
So, I mean, it just shows two different lines of how that. The net result is that in a 40-year span, going the pilot route, not only would we not be in trouble based upon the state funding formula, we actually would receive an additional $5.3 million more than if we went the traditional value. Okay? Questions on the Fraser piece?
Oh my gosh.
What happens if they go belly up? Are we held harmless?
That's a great question. I mean, I think we would be held harmless. They should be contractually obligated to pay us out. Now, obviously in a bankrupt world, I mean, so I don't know. And the other tough part is, and this has been brought to my attention too, and again, I don't know that I lose a ton of sleep over which way this goes, but I only know what I know today. And what I know today is, first of all, I don't have to make a choice on solar or no solar. That's somebody else's choice. But if there is solar to come here, what I know today is the pilot project looks better for the district than the other. That could change on paper.
Long term it looks better, but initially you have that spike, so.
If we felt like it was gonna go belly up in 15,
yeah,
then you'd be better to do the other one.
That's right.
Although we would lose money though too,
Right.
because we would lose money over that period from the state funding formula. But we don't know what the state funding formula will be next year, let alone, the next biennium budget. And so we have to make decisions based upon what we know today. I met with Bill Purcell today. We talked a little bit about it, and I don't envy those guys. I mean, they're kind of there are people that feel very strongly. But I would say to those people who feel very strongly about, even Bill Purcell and the county commissioners, they don't get to make the decision about whether we have solar fields or not.
Correct.
So, all right. That was my longest district update that we've had in a while. And so if you had dinner plans, I apologize, but we'll move things along rather quickly from this point out.
I just have a question. Did you want us to give you permission or
If you want to give me direction, yeah, I mean, if you want to do it, that's fine.
Or do you want us to wait until you bring a new policy that you've researched?
I guess I would be interested, and probably these folks would be interested in your thoughts relative to what I shared. Do you feel like we need to have a more defined selection process and more clearly define what it is so that we can help them
I
purchase?
think that makes it easier for everybody involved. I also like the fact that it would be expedited. Can do, you know.
So the
something-
challenge process would be the second part of that. How do you feel about, hey, we can kind of jump on these, let's take our preliminary look and maybe we'll agree, maybe we won't agree, but it at least speeds up the process and I don't have to pull committees together. Because quite frankly, pulling committees together would be a challenge. I mean, I might have a couple hands out here that would like to be on that committee, and I'd have people on other, you know, I mean, so you could, even making up the committee is not an easy thing. Trying to be fair in our representation of who's on committees. I don't know that I envy that either, so. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Can I ask a question? How many books do you have challenged? I'm sorry, I know this isn't Robert's rules, but
Say that again.
how many books? I mean, do you have a whole lot of books that are challenged, or?
I've had one book challenge in my 10 years.
Let's see, okay.
And so I just think we're living in a unique time where that's become a bit more of a rally cry. And again, right, wrong, or indifference, I mean, it could be true, it could be time for it. But we haven't had it. But one time in my tenure, I don't know prior to me if we had much of that. All right. Thank you. We have a number of items for board approval tonight. First off are the handbooks. I hope you got a chance to look at those. I apologize for giving them to you with 2 days only, but there were so few changes in there. We highlight those in yellow. I think the elementary might have had like 2 changes in their whole group. High school maybe a little bit more, but not much. We're also asking for approval tonight to adjust the district calendar. We are going to have a remote learning day on April 8th. That is the great solar eclipse. That's going to be going right over, we're right in the epicenter of that. And we've talked to law enforcement, emergency management folks, and this only happens every so often. And so there's a sense that there's going to be a lot of folks in this kind of a line. And actually the demarcation of the complete eclipse happens at about 3:20. It's when our buses are out on the roads. And so we're just trying to be mindful of all those tricky things there as we move forward. Item 3 is homeschool community participation. And item 4 is interesting. As you know, Rick takes our safety very, very seriously. The Career Center is now using this particular facility for a reunification place. Danville's now asking if they can use us as a reunification place because what they've seen is just the organized process. And it can be applicable to any school. We have the same entrances, we have the same stations, we have the same. And so, it was interesting that Danville wanted to be a part of that. So those 4 items for your approval.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve those 4 items as read.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ridley. I did a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Are there any questions? I did have a question regarding number 4 in the memorandum. I noticed that transportation was included, that we would provide transportation if needed, and I just wondered if that would be difficult if people are already.
I'd have to look a little more closely at that. I don't think we would send our buses down to Danville. Danville would send their kids here.
But I thought it said,
Maybe I'll-
else remember that we would provide transportation if necessary.
I thought it was Danville would provide it to
That's
their
what I thought.
kids. Yeah, we would not provide our transportation to their kids, but they would provide the
That would certainly be what I would expect. And so
That's what I would expect. but
Yeah.
if it reads differently, I mean, I hate to pull the item right now, but if it reads differently, then we'll come back
Yeah,
with
provide
that.
transportation if needed in the case of any of the Danville school buildings. So they would provide transportation to here.
And I read
Is the
it
way
as
I
part
read
of
it.
the memorandum that we
Okay.
would be responsible if necessary.
Good question, good question.
Anything else? Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rolla
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried, thank you.
You gotta open up the doors. It feels like the air is like stopped.
Well, it was, looked like we're gonna have thunderstorms, so I'm sure that's not gonna help today.
Yeah.
No. Okay, the student achievement, I'm gonna really simplify this evening. The first article was on science of reading, and I think we had a wonderful presentation from Columbia on that, so I didn't spend any time on that. The second one is on adult learning principles to improve onboarding experiences. This would be for new first-year teachers and also veteran teachers that are new to the district. And I think we have a wonderful orientation program already, but they did mention a couple of things that were of interest. And the basic questions for educational leaders would be what aspect of the teaching and learning philosophy are most relevant for teachers to explore during their onboarding. And then what elements of the teacher's role are imperative on the first day. So they would be given that information for sure. And then what might they expect as far as ongoing support and training after their initial orientation. So some of those things might be addressed. And the third article is on what is needed from school leaders and of course actively supporting teachers, helping them with collaboration and actively listening to them and recognizing social and emotional needs. All of those things were mentioned. And then there was an article on how powerful body language is and how we need to improve our nonverbal communication by being still and present in your body. In other words, giving the other person your full attention and really hearing what they're saying. So I thought that's always appropriate for all of us. And then the last one was that physical textbooks are still a core resource and play an important role in building structure and curriculum in the classrooms. And then the research article, we've all read about the National Assessment of Educational Progress and Nation's Report Card and the scores of the 13-year-olds and how they've dropped. And so we already know that. One of the interesting points that they made is that in 1922, 10% of the students reported missing more than 5 days, or at least 5 days or more, over a month, the past month. And that was double of what it was in 2020. So I think that, adds to the fact that, or contributes to the fact that students have lost them. I'm very pleased with our report card last year. We haven't seen this year's. I don't think, but that was after the pandemic. So I think we can be very pleased with our.
Well, I'll give you a spoiler alert. You're, I think, going to be quite pleased with this year's.
And we also didn't shut down like a lot of schools did.
Right.
So our kids had the benefit. We've also tried to address those learning gaps. So I think we're doing the right things. So I just pass that along. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. I did read all of them, but I don't want to take them. Okay.
I do have one item for board approval tonight. It's our gifted service plan. We do that annually, and it's there for your review. Dr. Dill does a great job of putting that together as our gifted director. And so if you have any questions, send them his way.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the gifted service plan.
So
moved. Thank you, Mrs. Getzmann. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Were there any questions? Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes.
Mr. Rolla
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Fiscal services, and this will be our treasurer's last report to us. So give him your full attention.
Let's make it short and sweet. Normal monthly board report. You will notice that this month, if Bill would go to page 3, does represent the end of last fiscal year for us. We can pause there and be thankful. We did really well in the investment realms, and again, that's every account from permanent improvement, general fund, to so on and so forth. You'll see the percentage I'll focus a little bit on the percentages more than I normally would because this is a completed fiscal year. So we always want to be as close to 100% as possible. But don't mind it when revenues go over 100%. That's actually, I like that. But and that can be a variety of reasons. I brought this up in preview. You know, if you have someone that is catching up on property taxes, that can push you over 100%. So those numbers are all welcome. Unfortunately, some of our expenses trended just a little bit over. And that's a result of a lot of things, from inflation to just the purchase service realm has become increasingly more challenging for us in terms of we're having to outsource some things that we would prefer to do in-house, but we can't find a licensed person to do it. So when we go outside the district, it's costing us more money than we would traditionally have paid. But other than that, it's really, this one is really boilerplate. The tax advances are started to come in the month of July, and you will see those represented in next month's report.
Gary won't mention this, but I'll mention it for him. So when you have an expenditures forecast that is truly a forecast of $24 million, to be at 99.39% under salaries and to be right at 100.27% of your projection, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, I'll take that all day.
Thank you for saying that, because
I was thinking it too.
that's 0.27%. That's a very small.
It's a bonus, Gary. It's a bonus.
As you scroll down, you can continue to look at the portfolios at your leisure. As you know, we invest some of our general fund dollars. As you know, we're heavily restricted in terms of where we can put those. And we also invest some of our self-insurance funds. So we have two separate investment accounts. They're both represented. That one's one, and then you have the next page if you would want to look at those. You're welcome to do so. In terms of appropriations, our local auditor, the Knox County auditor, wanted us to make a couple of changes to these, so we did that, and I'm going to bring it back to the board for your approval. Nothing of significance. So we're just essentially bringing this back from what we had last month with a couple of changes that I can't even remember. They were so nominal, but there they are. I can pause or go ahead and continue reading. Is that okay? Yeah. We have a couple donations. We have a donation from Katie Beach of multiple classroom book sets, historical and government materials, including books, DVDs, games, etc., valued in excess of $500. To Mount Vernon Middle School. Thank you, Mrs. Beach, for that, and we wish her best wishes in her new endeavors in her new district, but we greatly appreciate the donation. We have a donation from Kiwanis of $630 to purchase supplies to support kindergarten literacy to, obviously, the Mount Vernon City School District Board of Education. We appreciate that local civic group and their donation. Thank you very much. And we have an anonymous donation of $1,000 to the FFA in memory of Mike Small. And of course, that would go to the high school. We also have a couple memorial books. I've said this before, but since it was my last time, what a nice thing the board does on behalf of some of our grieving staff members. So we have a book in memory of Dixie Rockwell, the mother of Susan Rice, who just retired as a teacher at Twin Oak Elementary, and the title is Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll, and it will of course go to the Twin Oak Library. We have a donation in memory of Mike Small, father of Tiffany Burke, who's a teacher at Pleasant Street. The title is Someone Builds a Dream, and obviously it is going to the Pleasant Street Library.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion then to approve the fiscal services items as read.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gulladye. Do I have a second?
Second. I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Were there any questions? I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, Gary, for your work and your faithfulness to bring everything to us that you think is important. And I know there have been some challenges in trying to make sure everything works, and investments, and how you've learned so much in such a short time. We're just very proud of you, and thank you for all your service. And we wish you well in your new endeavor. We're very sad to see you go, but we're happy for you too. So thank you.
Well, I too would like to just say a personal thank you to Gary. I have so thoroughly enjoyed working with him. I won't say goodbye, I'll say till we meet again. Not only has he done an amazing job in his role, but the ability to go down and just have a conversation with him. He's a man of faith, which I greatly respect, and we have lots of great conversations, and I'll personally miss him very much. He always had something in his office for me when I went down. He had this big jar, and he put Good and Plenty's in there, and so, you know, he didn't even like Good and Plenty's, but, you know, he would call his wife, bring in some more Good and Plenty's, you know. And so I always had this jar, so I figured, you know what, I gotta do something for Gary when he leaves. So I didn't realize this, but Gary really likes gum, according to one of his colleagues. So, Gary, this is a double bubble gum. You take that with you on your next venture, and you can chew away, my partner. And, appreciate you a lot.
Absolutely.
Honor and a privilege to work for this board. Thank you so much for both opportunities.
Thank you.
Same here.
And
Thank
a couple of us still get to work with you on the
Yes.
Career Center, so we're happy about that.
Till we meet again.
So we meet again next
Absolutely.
month.
And you may call the roll, please.
Mr. Golodai.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried, thank you. And Ms. Gulladye, legislative liaison.
Thank you. Just a very brief update. New legislation introduced, SB 134, which extends the homestead property tax exemption to certain disabled veterans. SB 136 reduces property taxes on qualifying owner-occupied houses. This is known as the Property Tax Relief and Local Government Support Act. And then finally, HB 33 was approved and signed by the governor, which is the state operating budget. The Ohio Department of Education is now going to be termed the Department of Education and Workforce, and it will be led by a director approved by the governor with the approval of the Senate. And then, of course, other changes will be forthcoming from that, the budget. And we hope that they won't be too negative an impact on our public schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a number of facility use requests. I don't know that I'll go down through and read all of them. Some of them, you know, we had that little bit of a layoff there between June and July. So SPY has used Columbia Elementary, Crystal Dowell, Pleasant Street Gym. The Colt football, we use the field in the stadium. They're very active right now. Ironically, today, if you would leave here and go out and look in the big area, we have the Ohio cyclists here, and they made today one of their stops in Mount Vernon, and they're going to spend the night. I doubt they're going to camp outside. They're probably going to be inside, but they go from Western Ohio all the way to Eastern Ohio in a certain number of days. This happens to be a spot they like to stop, go down and spend money at our restaurants and in our, so we're glad to have them. And then finally in this section, we're going to enter into a contract with Knox Community Hospital for a certified athletic trainer. We've done it through Mohican Sports Medicine in the past. Unfortunately, because of some staffing issues, they're not able to facilitate that part of the contract, and we've had a very great relationship with them. Thankfully, our relationship with Knox Community Hospital, they're able to provide that service.
I would entertain a motion to approve those business services items. Thank you, Mr. Workman. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Getzmann. Were there any questions? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes.
Mr. Golodai.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. And student services. You presenting or Mrs.
I'm going to turn it over to Pam for this section.
A lot of
There are
items.
things that she's been working pretty hard in her waning days as the full-time director of student services.
All right. It won't be as long as Bill's presentation, but it will attach to some of the things that Gary mentioned earlier. So I have one item for information, and that's the determination of transportation and practicality. That's for your review. And then I have a number of recommendations. One of them is the resolution of that impracticality. The second one, I'm going to go through these just to remind you of what those are. SpectraCore, that is an agreement that we've had probably 4 or 5 years now. It's the same company that Knox Community Hospital uses, so that when we have Zoom calls with families who don't speak English, we have a translator join us on screen, and there are, I think, 16 different languages, and I can get one of those people in 5 minutes and get them on the line. So it's been really, really helpful. We haven't had to use it, but they even have a sign language one. We played with it one time just to see if it worked. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio. We use sometimes we have to use an outside ESC rather than the one locally, because our ESC may not have those kind of services. So this is for orientation and mobility. Those are for students that are visually impaired and are using canes for navigation through the building, so they need some extra supports in learning how to do that. Type 4 transportation contracts, these are for those transportation and practicality families. EJ Therapy does occupational and speech services for students who are placed, not by us, but placed through outside agencies at the LEAP program in Worcester. That's an educational program that takes care of the students that are at what used to be called the Boys Village in Worcester. When students are placed there in that residential treatment program, they still need to have school. So the program called LEAP is that educational entity, and then they don't have those services in-house, so they contract. So basically we contract with them. Healthcare staffing, as Gary said earlier, sometimes we can't find speech therapists and school psychologists right now are the two that, if anyone has a student going to college, send them that direction, because there's a job market all over Ohio for those. So we are contracting outside for some of the services this year. GCL, that's another, that is actually the LEAP program owner company. Educational services through Tri-County. This is who handles the coordination of our Ohio School Medicaid program, which provides some of that reimbursement for some of our services that we provide to students. ProCare is a different company that's providing a speech path for us at Dan Emmett. And Mansfield Psychological is the company that is providing our psychology services for half of our district. We had one of our psychologists resign to go to another district, and we had no applicants. So I have those for your approval.
Thank you. And I would entertain a motion to approve those 10 items.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Gassman. And were there any questions? I'm sure Mrs. Rose would come back. Okay, hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Ward,
Yes.
Mrs. Gatzman,
Yes.
Mr. Workman,
Yes.
Mr. Golodai,
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Personnel.
Under the section, just one item for information, a couple salary change notices. We have a number of recommended items for board approvals at the beginning of the year. We are rescinding a couple contracts because of folks who have moved into different positions or resigned. So you'll see that there. We do have 4 resignations, and we wish all of them well. They're all going to different areas. We do have some new teachers. Laura Gentis will be a history teacher at Vernon Middle School. Mindy Weimer will be a special education intervention specialist at Mount Vernon High School, and Issa Lucky or Lucky?
Lucky.
Lucky, Issa Lucky. She's going to be a social worker at the high school. Those are some of the new folks for us. And then you've got your 1-year contract. We're bringing back Mary Jo Berensmeyer. One of those resignations was our Latin teacher, and Latin has kind of continued to dwindle a little bit, but we still feel like those kiddos who started in Latin, we need to find a path for them to finish. And so Mary Jo Behrensmeyer, who has been a longtime Latin teacher, beloved by Betty, has agreed to come back. We're thankful for that. Number of transfers, substitute teacher contracts. These are all your supplemental contracts that would not be athletic in nature, more clubs and productions. Full-time substitute, volunteers, and then a number of layperson pupil activity contracts for your approval tonight.
Would entertain a motion to approve those certificated license.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Thank you, Mr. Workman. Were there any questions?
I have no question, but just a comment that the letters from the people who were resigning were so gracious and spoke so highly of our school system and how much they appreciated being here and being a part of this great school system.
Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Regola-Dye.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Ward. Yes. Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Classified staff.
Our last section tonight is the classified staff. Just a few items for information. They're really transfers, so notifying you that some of those have made some transfers to different buildings. We're recommending tonight, under Section B, a food service consultant contract to Mark Kime. We'll probably go into executive session and talk about this position when we're done, but as food service director, he's taken a new role during this transition to have him help for just a very limited number of days on a per diem basis was important. And then we've got some employment of some new folks, so library aides, second shift custodians, and you can read the rest. A number of 2-year contacts, a stipend for Rick Schaefer to continue as our safety and security director, and a summer work crew member. So those items for your approval.
Would entertain a motion to approve the 7 items.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Were there any questions? Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Ward. Yes. Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Ms. Regola-Dye.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. On to the board member comments. And, Mr. Workman, would you like to?
I hope everybody's having a good summer. I would also like to thank Gary. I don't know if a thank you will do. Been able to work with you for 4 years. That went very fast through some challenging times, to say the least. But certainly appreciate your wisdom, everything you've done. Sorry to lose you, but I know it's a good opportunity for you. But thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Ward.
Okay, well, I too, Gary, have appreciated working with you in a limited amount of time, but I've known you for a long time. So congratulations on the next step that you're taking. We're a little sad, but we'll be okay. But thank you. And also wanted to thank our superintendent for his work that we saw through the presentation tonight. I touched on it earlier, but I do appreciate the time and the care that you've put into that. I know there's still more to do, that's fine. But I think the presentation here, I think starts us in a direction that we need to go, so thank you for that.
I'm next. Thank you to the people who are here this evening and those who may be watching at home. It is an honor and a privilege to be a member of this board. I have never worked with such wonderful people in my life after 35 years of teaching, and that was wonderful. This is certainly an honor for me. And I'd like to remind everyone that public education is one of the pillars of our democratic republic. Without it, I think that our country would not continue to be what it is. And so I'd like to thank the public for their support, and what an honor it is to be here in my alma mater district.
And congratulations again.
Absolutely.
And Mrs. Getzmann.
Well, I had on the top of my list a thank you to Gary Hankins, so I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you. I had the pleasure I guess pleasure, I don't know what the right word is, but as he leaves Mount Vernon City, he is joining the Career Center, so as a part of that board, it was an honor to know that he's still serving our community and serving it very well. So thank you for all that you have given to Mount Vernon City, and we are better off because you've been here several years, so thank you for that. I know the next time we will meet, school will be in session. So I know there has been a lot of work that has gone on in our buildings this summer with our summer work crew, our janitorial services, and our administrators who are currently off, but have taken the time to make sure that we are ready for a new school year. So in preparation for welcoming our new teachers and our veteran teachers back. I know there's been a lot of work and dedication put into that, so thank you to all of those, and thank you to Mr. Cedar as well as we prepare for a new year.
And I'd like to thank all of those who came this evening and appreciate your input, even though sometimes it's hard. We want to hear from our parents. We want you to be engaged, and in our community, input is important. I'd also like to give a shout out to the Community Hope, I think is what it's called.
Oh.
Looking at you. They had a bus parked at Memorial Park, and we're giving out free books to kids.
Mhm.
And I just appreciate the emphasis on reading, and also little puffs of What's ice cream. And they do this just, they don't have to. They make a point of reaching out to the children at Memorial Park, and they had been at Riverside the day before and had long lines, they told me. So we have kids who are reading who may not have been reading because they want some free books. So I just appreciate their concern and doing this on their own time in the summer. So that's a great program. So we appreciate that. And again, thank you, Gary, for your years with us as a principal, and then coming back as a treasurer. And, you're a man of integrity, and
Yes,
we appreciate
absolutely.
you. So thank you. We wish you well. And I now would entertain a motion to go into executive session. As I understand, you want to talk about personnel.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lozano.
A second.
And Mr. Whitman. And if you call the roll, then.
Mr. Rolla,
Yes.
Mr. Workman,
Yes.
Mr. Ward, Mrs. Getzmann,
Yes.
Dr. Gooding.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you all again for coming.